Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. Would you mind introducing yourself for the audience, please?
My name's Adam Taylor, and I'm a British abstract painter based in Pembrokeshire in Wales.
Very nice. And I've been looking back at your Instagram account, and I noticed that at the very first post that you did in 2018 was of a still life of bottles. I think it was just called The Drinkers. And it seems as though it was only a couple of years after that that you started to establish this style that you've really built on. Is that something which you started that way? Was there more of that type of still life work until you started becoming more abstract?
Yeah, it was. I used to be at university. I was doing more still life, figurative work. And it was I got into abstraction. It seemed quite dramatic. I'd moved to Pembrokeshire. To backtrack a bit, I joined university, met 3 other people. We formed a band, playing like sort of arty sort of rock music. And then the band, we ended up touring, put a record out, got signed to a label, played Europe, America, all the different places, and the band took over, so I just wasn't painting. And I didn't paint for probably 10, 15 years. And then I met my now wife, and she had a teaching post out in Tenby, this small little fishing village or fishing town in Pembrokeshire. So I moved in with her. I sort of took a risk and moved down here. And the band had sort of imploded, and I was just a bit lost. I was working a terrible job. I was sort of just a bit rudderless and lost, I think. So I started painting again and started up, as you do, because I was comfortable with the still life works. That's what I had done 15 years previous. Started painting still lives, lots of fish. The painting you described, The Drinkers, that was of sort of 3 old men, I think, wasn't it? Drunk. That was the idea behind it. That kind of sort of very chaoticness. And then I got a job with a foraging company. Whether this is going to sound corny, but I got a job with a foraging company, and one of the jobs was collecting seaweeds from the sea, and I would spend hours upon hours in the winter, in the rain, on the beach. It would be 8-hour days. So sounds nice doing the foraging, but it is quite brutal. And the sky was this kind of grey blue colour. The sea was a very grey blue colour. The sand's very light here, so that also reflects this grey blue. And I was kind of hours in this bleak, open, empty world with no people there. You barely saw a soul there, all by myself. And I got back to painting, and I've always enjoyed painting and the still life, but I was more interested in sort of balance, where I was placing things. I think with still life, it's all about balance, but then the things you're painting has to convey what you're painting. So if you get beautiful balance within the painting, but the banana doesn't look right, the painting doesn't work. And it was almost quite sudden as someone that had never done abstract, and whether it was linked to this big, vast, empty landscape I was being exposed to every day, I suddenly started putting a blue background down and then painting upon that, and just making marks rather than actually trying to depict a fish or an apple or an orange or that sort of thing. So in a way, it's a kind of still life abstract, kind of the marks are the objects almost.
That's wonderful. I mean, it is this marriage of reality and a poetic visual language, and you seem to have such a natural instinct for it. Did you kind of find it more, I suppose I'm wondering if it's something which you really had to work out, or if you just found that it kind of was what's the word I'm looking for? I suppose
Natural.
if it was natural, or kind of came to you in a way without too much of a struggle. Yeah
It did. It's especially as abstract art wasn't something I was particularly interested in before that. So another big turning point for me was I discovered a Welsh painter called Roger Cecil. No, hardly anyone's ever heard of him. And that was I'd started to get into to doing more abstract work. And then I happened to show someone, and they said that looks like Roger Cecil's work. So I googled him, and it was like I fell in love straight away. Just his work's amazing. He's dead now. He died not too long ago. I think 2014, but I might be wrong about that. And he lived in the valleys in South Wales all his life and painted. And he didn't paint for financial means. He lived in his mum and dad's house, and he just did these incredible abstract paintings. And I think it shows that he was painting, almost without an audience. His audience was himself. If he liked the painting, it was a good painting. And if you take a look afterwards, his work blew my mind.
I will.
So interestingly, she said my work looked like his, and then when I saw his work, it blew my mind. And then I had to sort of rein myself in from trying to copy his work. Then I was just feeling like, this is where I want to be. So he was I'd forgotten that. He was a very good introduction into my abstract work. He was the kind of the severing of the cord from figurative to abstract. I just thought I don't need to be, have to paint, figuratively. Well, they're saying that he has done a few figurative paintings, but check him out. He's not people have heard of him, but he's ever so good. Probably one of my favorite painters.
Yeah, I will. No, I'll be showing it on the screen as well. But for audio listeners, I am conscious of the fact that when we have an abstract artist on, I'm inclined to try and describe to some extent what they're missing, when they're listening to the audio. And one of the things that I really enjoy is that you have this sort of tiles to your pieces, where it's a grid of 6 or so. Really well. I mean, I don't know if it's varnished, or they almost look like they are kitchen that you've painted on. So what is that process? How have you done that?
No, this is I enjoy talking process. I'm more comfortable talking process than theory, but that started so it is one panel. They're not 6 or 9 different panels. So that came from I always start with painting the same way, with a ground color, which normally is blue or pink. I don't know whether that stemmed from this. I was quite interested in capturing a sort of dreamscape, a sort of landscape of your dreams. So I'd start with this blue background, and then suddenly, especially on some larger paintings, say it's 1.50 meter by 1.50 meter, for example, it's suddenly this terrifying blue board in front of you that you then have to start applying layers to and paint to, and it became it's just very intimidating. So I found, as an aid to help me with composition, if I gridded it up into it started as a compositional aid, So I would then grid it using oil pastel and a spirit level into 9 different panels, and then use that to work out where to start putting my marks. But then by accidentally, from that process, I divided this huge board into 9 separate paintings. And to me, 9 small paintings were a lot less scary than one big one. I could then work on just a corner and you'd have to worry about the, and then once I'd done that corner, it led to the next corner and then the next corner. And then I'd look at the first corner I'd done and think it's awful. And then I'd rub it out. Then that corner, and it just sort of spanned on from there. So to describe my paintings, I never go into them knowing what I'm going to paint. I apply quite a lot of paint. It's normally, it's a blue background with, I usually don't use many tones. It's normally a darker blue, something like that, or a brown. And I'll make a lot of marks. It'd be a lot busier, the painting. And then I then try and edit out or rub out with a rag and white spirits areas I'm not happy with or not working, to become much more of a minimal painting. And I probably do more rubbing out. The rag is probably the biggest tool I use. I use that as much as I do the paintbrush. And then what I find starts to happen is where I remove paint, I paint on board, so in the wood, in the slight grain or whatever, it captures bits of paint, and perhaps some of it's dried. I've done a couple of nights before. And when you rub it off, it doesn't get it all off, and it sort of leaves a bit of a ghost behind. And that mistake can either be really annoying, or it can suddenly think, oh, that's kind of cool. That's led on to another idea where I could extend that there. And it's these little ghosts of things that sort of often help the painting along. I use lots of masking tape as well. I'll often, the top square, I'll mask the square off and just work on that. And where I rub out, sometimes under the masking tape where I haven't put it on that well, the paint sort of gathers a bit, and that leaves a sort of ghost when you remove the masking tape. So I was discovered by accident, and I'm almost reluctant to not use the grids. Yeah. It's like some control thing, I think. It has to be. I think my paintings are quite loose and dreamlike, and the grid is a way to me to perhaps put some sort of stamp of control
a bit of order on top.
Some order, yeah, that's a really nice way. I think also I use, there's not much colour in my painting at all other than the blue background. Oh, and the blue background, I don't paint ever wet on wet. The blue background, it's 2 layers of the blue-green colour, and then I let it completely dry for a week or so. And then once it's dry, I then start painting the next layer. But when I grid it up, I use oil pastel, and I pick a few different colours randomly, like an orange or a pink or a purple. And that's just that tiny little millimetre of line adds a bit of colour and introduces a bit of colour that I wouldn't normally add with paint. I have this weird phobia of colour. I wish I was braver with it.
I don't want you to wander too far from what you're doing, though, because I mean, if you start to become braver, you may lose this signature that you've built up, which is a wonderful. It's just a world that you are projected into, and I find it interesting that you go in with no idea of what you're going to create, because it seems so confident in the concept that you lay down that I'm wondering now whether you do something and then retroactively name it based on what you can read in there, or do you start to guide it once it starts to speak to you in a way?
Yeah, that's the whole issue, is waiting for the painting to speak to you. And without sounding too hippy-dippy when you're talking about all these sort of things, is that's a big moment. And you paint as well, obviously, and you'll probably know this, it doesn't always speak to you, does it?
No.
And not to sound too doom and gloom, but a painting could take me maybe a couple of days if everything's going well, but it can also take me months because the painting's just not speaking to me. And it's very frustrating, and I'm rubbing out more than I'm putting on. And it can be a sort of dark time. I just, I can feel quite miserable, and you get moments where you think, I can't do this anymore. And what I find interesting, that I've just thought of this now, is I'll do an exhibition. I've just had an exhibition in Mallorca, and the work's out there. I'm really pleased with it. It looks to me, I couldn't be happier. It looks great, and I'm sort of buzzing from it. Come back to the studio, went out to Mallorca to see it, come back to the studio, and rather than have learned from that experience and think, I've done that, the next lot of work's going to be that times 10, it's like starting from scratch again. It's like I don't know how to paint, and so I go through the doom and gloom sort of period again, where it's kind of it's just a case of working through it, I guess.
Mm.
I'm not sure whether it's artistic block or I don't know what it is, but
So
I suffer with that. Sorry, just to butt in.
No.
I think, and I suffer this as well, when you're looking at art on social media and you're looking at artist websites and going to exhibitions, you get this feeling that there's artists I like that just seem to be able to, they're confident, they can just do it, and there's no stress or pressure. And I wonder if that's perhaps what you were saying, whether it appears that that's what's happening, but behind the scenes, it's the complete opposite. I'm spending nights of, having almost a breakdown with the. It sounds so dramatic, all this, doesn't it?
Well, no, you're not the first artist to kind of talk around an existential crisis that we all have in the midst of trying to be creative.
Yeah,
but it does seem. Yeah. Sorry, please.
Oh, sorry, that creative block, or that's, I don't know what it is. I think it's trying to make a painting. First of all, the painting has to resonate with me, that I'm painting, and then it has to somehow resonate with someone else and make them feel something or respond to it in some way. And to make that happen is difficult, I find. And it first has to resonate with me, and then once it's resonate with me, that's the first hurdle, and then hopefully. I have this kind of, if I'm struggling with a painting, I'll bring it home, and then it's then in our front room, and I'll just, every night when I'm talking to my wife or whatever, I'll just be staring at it and almost like willing it to be good. That is the kind of purgatory that I always call that, my painting purgatory. Yeah. Where I'll have an unfinished painting. There'll be one now in my front room, and often if I'm painting a large one, like a 170 centimeter, we only have a small house. It can take up most of the room. And it's just there. It's like my challenge, and I stare at it, and I have my cup of tea looking at it, or I'll drink a beer looking at it. And I think it's that process where I start to work out what the painting wants. Sorry, I'll stop talking now. I'll let you.
No, this is interesting, because it does sound as though it's a battle with the kind of obsession of trying to find it a kind of almost a harmony which you can comfortably live with. And then, because when it comes to the type of work that you do, it must sometimes be difficult to know how much you want to put on there and how much you need to take off in order to make it comfortable, because it can be incredibly minimal and have the perfect amount of input on the surface, compared to trying to overwork it and think, oh, it needs to be counterbalanced with this, and being too analytical. It surely has to be something that's more instinctive when it comes to what actually works for you. It's got to be just about how you feel, as opposed to anything too mathematical. Is that true?
Yeah, which is I guess what makes painting interesting, and then what makes it frustrating as well. Like if you learnt cabinet making, for example, it's a sort of skill that you could use again and again and repeat that skill, whereas the skill of painting doesn't seem to you can't conjure it up when you need it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking for myself. I don't know about for other people, but for me, it's not an easy process. It can be frustrating, and I think again, just for myself, it's an addictive thing, because when you, after a month of tearing your hair out, thinking you can't do it anymore, getting depressed, when you finally do something that I'm happy with, it just feels amazing. It just feels like you've won the lottery or something.
Yeah.
So I think it's that you're always chasing that same sort of feeling.
Yeah.
I'll often bring paintings in, and I'm kind of happy with it, but I know it's not good, if you know what I mean. And I bring it in, and I'll I'll say to my wife, "Do you like this?" And I'm hoping for her to say, "Yeah, oh yeah, it's amazing." And then she'll say, I don't think it's good." And then, but I know that it's not good.
Yeah.
And she's told me honestly it's not good. But I kind of already knew that, if you know what I mean. And I was
Yeah.
just hoping she would say it's good to try and convince myself. But
There's a lot of self-doubt, isn't there? A lot of questioning
Yeah.
of your own observation, because I mean, you spend so much time with the painting, you start to question every decision and every opinion that you will you know, kind of build on the way that it looks, on the process. You'll see every step that you've taken to make it, whereas people who are seeing your work for the first time have no idea how it's just materialized on the surface. And again, it's the illusion of confidence that art has, where even I've heard that Constable even was having epiphanies whilst he was painting, and it looks as though he had everything planned and measured and ready to go. But I've heard that along the way, he apparently discovered certain things as he would paint. And it just doesn't seem to tell us that when we read it. When we read the painting, we just read it as a finished work from a masterful hand. So yeah, it must be tricky to try and reconcile that, because some of your marks, this is what I find really interesting as well, some of the marks that you score across the painting will go from very deep to kind of almost washed out, as though the background is wet. So when you told me that the background layer is dry, that's even more impressive, because it seems as though you've wiped away part of one of the panels and the rest of it stays quite opaque, and the other ones, you know, got half opacity or semi-transparency to it. It's interesting. It's really, yeah, it's an interesting kind of phenomena to abstract work that I think you don't get with a lot of other work, you know.
Yeah, well, back to what you were saying about how it's painting's perceived by people that haven't done the painting. I get a glimpse of that, and I love this. And it's, you send your work off to an exhibition, you don't see it for a month or so, or maybe more. And my studio is not big, my studio is small, my house is small, so I never get to see the body of work together. And then once it's hung, it's like I'm seeing the work for the first time, and the work doesn't feel like my work in a strange, sounds daft to say, but that weird month or 2 month separation, and I've started working on other things, I then go to the exhibition to see the work hung, and it feels like someone else's work, and I quite enjoy it. It's kind of, I've forgotten the pain that it took to, and the frustration it took to make it. I'm just seeing it as a painting that I've done. It sometimes surprises me in a positive way.
Yeah, I think the space makes a huge difference. I mean, because I don't think we've said this in the meeting, we were talking beforehand about how I'd become introduced to your work through the gallery Ffin Parc, and that space is one which I speak to the gallerist Ralph about, how I go to certain shows and I feel as though if that show were in a different space, it would have done better. Whereas the space at Ffin Parc, I always appreciate, because it seems so considered and spacious, to be honest. And that's part of why I think it's got this lovely ambience when you actually enter the building. And your work there stands out because nothing is like it as well. So you have your own distinct voice, which is a real bonus, I think, for artists. I think artists struggle with that, to try and stand out from others. And you almost have this signature background color where it's we say a blue, but it's kind of a bluey green. Is that relates to your coastline work of kind of, you know, getting the seaweed and things? Was it kind of very washed out blue, where it was a blue green, because it's a very on the edge, it's not a rich blue, is it?
It takes, I mix up a big vat of that in a big pot, so I can get a lot. I try and sort of get a lot painted blue, because there's a couple of days drying time, or a couple of weeks sometimes, and I do 2 layers of it. So I mix up a big vat, and getting that color right, it sounds ridiculous, but it takes so long. It can be too blue, too green, too dark, too light. But one thing I do on top of that is I discovered this stuff, this tar stuff, this like bitumen that you paint roofs with. that sort of thing. And you could buy it, you know, DIY stores, that sort of stuff. And once the blue's on, I give the whole thing a thick coating of that, and then I rub it back off again using a rag. And I can't explain it, but where it stays in the grain slightly, it does something to turn a blue into more of a turquoisey blue. It's a weird one.
It's actual bitumen that you're using.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's
How did you
not good.
discover that?
Good question. I think that came from when we first bought this house. The previous owners had just left loads of stuff, loads of odds and ends and pots of paints, and I was just kind of getting. It was when I first got back into art. I think I was just grabbing things, and I suddenly noticed this stuff. It's really bad for you health wise, but it seems to hate white spirit. It just really you put white spirit on it. It just
Wow.
seems to the chemical reaction there. So you get some nice things going on with bitumen, splash a bit of white spirit on, and I started noticing. I just through experimentation. I can't quite remember. I used it at the start. It's all oil paints now, but when I first started out, I didn't have much money, and it was just house paint I was painting with. You know, oil based, whatever was left behind, whatever I could pick up.
Yeah.
But I moved away from that into your traditional oil paints, and then a bit of bitumen. It has a beautiful darkness to it. It's like a very black, but it's a warm black.
Yeah.
It's been used in paintings for hundreds of years, but it's not nice stuff. I've just read it; it's carcinogenic, and I think most of the stuff us painters paint with kills you, doesn't it? But that kills you. That I think it's a baddie.
I wasn't aware that it's been used for years. I mean, I've done a bit of roofing, so I know bitumen from that experience, but I didn't know that it had been used in painting before.
Yeah, I think it was used as light washes to for warm shadows. I think.
Really?
You'll have to go. I'm not that knowledgeable on it. We have to Google it, but it's if you have a look, it's been used for dark areas. I think as a light wash.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow. And so does I mean, this is kind of going back a little bit, but I do always wonder, because I used to make music as well, and I wonder if that still factors at all into your creativity, is that musical side, as much as that's something which may feel like a previous life. And it's the same with myself. It still has a certain influence to it, to the extent of I suppose it's the style of music that I used to make would still echo through into the visual work that I would create. I think if you knew me back then, you would see a relation between the music then, the music now that I still make, and the artwork that I make would have a loose thread connecting them. Can you see that with yourself?
Definitely. That's quite a good question. I think for me, more the music. I did it for 10 years in the band I was in. Although the whole band imploded and is no longer going, what I got from it, I think now, is the fact that it is more the business end of it. The fact that in the band you're managing yourself. I found labels are very similar to galleries. They're very positive and very into you, but then quickly the next thing comes along and they're not. And I found it's almost identical worlds, I think, with the world of promoting yourself on social media, dealing with all the galleries. They're very similar. The music industry and the art industry, I think, seem very similar. The process seems very similar with all the highs and lows. You do a great piece of music you're happy with, that resonates with people and they love it, and also you do things that flop. Similar. The big difference I find is towards the end it was a 5-piece, so, and I quite like the way there's always people. There's with the band, there's a camaraderie with other people, and also a bad gig you can blame everyone else. It's not just. Whereas with art, it's just it's a lonely life.
Yeah.
With the music, because I was in a band, there was more. It was more social, and if we got into difficult situations, there was they were, well, we were friends, so it was someone to sort of to help out a bit. And if it was a bad gig, you could blame the drummer. So if it's a bad gig, it's my fault. But yeah, similar worlds. And I think music-wise, although we were doing guitar-based rock music, it was always very experimental. We had a viola player going through various pedals. We had someone playing mandolin, and lots of instruments we've made ourselves. We were using contact mics, these sort of, you can put things, and we're adding loads of reverb, and you're making our own sort of percussion and doing various experimental things. And I think that's with the painting as well. It's kind of that sort of experimentalness is lent over to the painting.
Now,
but like you say, I find them very similar worlds.
Yeah, I've got more questions about that, but for the listeners, they will be very annoyed with me if I don't ask you the name of the band, because they will want to look it up. What's the name?
It's a long name. It's not the catchiest of titles. It's the Victorian English Gentlemen's Club.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, we formed in 2005, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was financially a disaster, but life-wise, it was great. I got to tour most of Europe and got to go to America, played festivals in America. We recorded an album with the drummer from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So some interesting things.
Yeah.
But financially a disaster.
This may be a step further than what I can connect these threads, but I'm wondering if, similarly to the music, whether you feel as though a body of work that you create will have, a certain amount of tracks, like an album that you're making. Does the show relate to that extent? Do you feel as though you're doing that?
Definitely. That as soon as you said that, I thought of course. An exhibition is very much like an album. We did 5 albums, and it's very much like that. And also in the way that you do an album, you're really pleased with it, you think it's amazing, same as you do an exhibition, and then you look back a few years later and you're thinking, oh man, this album's terrible. And the exhibition, you look back and think, oh, I was so naive, I'm so much better then. And it was that same kind of feeling.
Yeah.
It's like exactly like you say, an album is like a body of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it might connect because when you're making an album, you'll have certain songs that you'll have to make. You'll think, oh, we need a song that does this. So I wonder if there's paintings that you're making for a show where you think, I need one that does this as well, just to sort of say this in the show as well, which the others don't say.
Yeah. I think both worlds mimic each other very similarly. I said the word anyway. For example, we'll make a song that is exciting to us because it's doing something different. It might be a noise song, it might have no melody in it whatsoever, and that excites us. But it's not a particularly good song. We're more getting off on the fact that we're feeling excited because it's different. And the same in painting. I'll do a painting that is not perhaps like my normal work, and it will make me feel excited because it's new to me, but it's not necessarily a good painting. It's just I'm getting excited because it's a new process.
Yeah.
And I think them worlds sort of mirror each other, I think. So interesting you brought that up.
No, I'm glad. I wonder how many paintings do you do that don't get worked into a successful finished piece? Because with songs, you will have certain songs where you think, we just can't work that out. It's going to have to be shelved. It can't make the cut onto the album. Is that the case with paintings, or do you always manage to wipe them back and progress them to that finished stage?
In a way, yeah. I feel the wiping back is getting rid of sometimes I'll have a painting that'll excite me that a month later I'll suddenly think is no good, and then I'll have to physically sand it back with an electric sander to get it flat again. So all the paintings come back. It's like paintings probably have a lot of ghosts of old paintings that are stuck in them. But yeah, similar in that respect, that loads of paintings don't make it, but the panels they're painted on always do.
Yeah. And do you photograph them, or is it just lost? Is it just that's just gone?
Sometimes they get photographed, but then I'll delete the photograph because I don't like to even see the image of them. But yeah, I don't have much pictures of my failed work or old work, tend to delete it and move on.
Yeah, it's perhaps a burden that you can do without anyway, is to be weighed down by this folder of unsuccessful pieces.
And back to the music again, and this is not so interesting for people that haven't recorded before, but the physical recording of the music is like painting, that when you see the monitor, when you're recording it, all the different instruments are different colors. So you'll have the guitar, the tambourine, the vocal mic, and you build the song. I can't record. It was always someone recording us, a producer or whatever. But I would be looking at the monitor, and you get these different colors representing different things. And he would suggest, the guitar's not working, let's lose the guitar. So the guitar would go, and suddenly the red color of the guitar would be gone, or you'd move things up. And that's, to me, mirrors painting in a way, is that kind of building of, perhaps it was just the way I was looking at it, because I couldn't record music, because I didn't know how. I was looking at it as a visual thing on the computer screen. The tracks. This probably doesn't make any sense for people that don't do music.
I think it does. I mean, it's not only that, but you kind of, I shouldn't say this as a rule, but my understanding of how people record, certainly how me and my group used to record, was that we'd try to make sure that it was balanced with, if we had something that was quite bassy, we tried to counteract it with something that was fairly high, so that they kind of sang with each other in a way that was complementary. So even if it was something percussive, something that was kind of like tapping quite high, where something else would play quite low, it would just work with each other. It would just harmonize better than if we were trying to compete with these low, muddy sounds. So I feel as though that's something which can relate to visual imagery as well, is that you need to try and find a balance between something which does one thing in a quite a heavy way, and then have something lighter to really speak with that contrast.
Yeah. I think that's the nail on the head, isn't it? Yeah.
What did you do in the band? What was your role?
Played guitar and sang.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So were you the kind of lead of the band? Would you kind of lead it in a way?
Yeah, I used to. Well, in the way that, although we were essentially an alternative rock band, we were quite non-traditional in a way, and I would write the songs, and then we'd take it to band practice room. We'd all sort of slog it out and work out what was working and what was not working, and yeah,
because it's a lot of problem solving working with a group as well, which can be tricky.
Yeah, it can. And we've found that some of the arguments I've had, I wouldn't even have arguments with anyone in my life like we had in that room back in 2004.
Yeah,
I couldn't even imagine that situation now. That would be insane.
Yeah,
the sort of arguments I think you would all be in this world, and you'd think this song is the most important thing in the world, and it would cause the biggest rows and storm outs, and we're arguing about nonsense essentially. But to us, it was really important.
It's like road rage, isn't it? When you're in it, it feels very important.
Yeah.
When you're a couple of cars behind, it looks pathetic. So
yeah. Nail on the head.
Yeah, I've got this vivid memory of arguing with a couple of bandmates about a way that I thought we just had to do it in this sequence, and they wouldn't accept what I was proposing. So I said, we can either do this now and try it and see what you think, or we'll try every other way that you think can work, but I'm saying it has to be this way, and I'll tell you why. And I told them why, and they just didn't accept it. So we spent the rest of the day slowly getting to what I proposed earlier on, and I could see it had to be done, but because they wouldn't accept it, we'd already got to this heated point where I thought, I don't want us all storming out. So I just say, right, we'll just do whatever you think we should try. And we tried everything. And I know it sounds terrible because I'm the winner of the argument. It's a terrible story to tell, but I knew it had to be a certain way, and it just became this friction that we couldn't get past until we had to go just all the way around the houses until we'd got to this only way that it could possibly be. And it's strange how you become so, your heels are just dug into this argument. It's very unusual. And I suppose there isn't that. That's what you've got with yourself when you're working with a painting, is surely it has to be this. And then making the difficult decision of, it can't be. I'm going to have to change the whole thing, or I'm going to have to remove this. Part. Yeah.
I think that's probably why bands split up over, I don't know, the food's not warm enough, or some like ridiculous things. All this tension has built up.
Yeah.
I think back to my band. A lot of the issue was I was we all came from the sort of art slant, but I was always pushing for melody more, and one of the other key members was more into noise and experimentation, and that sort of caused a bit of clashes. A bit, you know, she was more interested in pushing the audience further than I felt comfortable pushing the audience. So that was a big sort of thing. Yeah.
Are you still in touch with them though? Is it? It's not severed ties completely, or have you?
It's quite severed.
Is it? Yeah.
Quite severed, yeah. There's the violin player I'm still friends with.
Yeah.
Oh, the drummer as well. Sorry, I forgot the drummer. Yeah, of course. I messaged him yesterday actually. We live. Another issue is we live very far apart. I think, and another back to the band again, because financially it was not ideal. I think you start as very happy, and then over the years, if there is no sort of financial benefit to it whatsoever, I think it gets difficult for all the members. And I think that's when people start to argue. You know, we all enjoyed sleeping on floors and in the van and slumming it. And I remember one tour we were getting £50. We were supporting this band and we were getting £50. This is back in 2006. We were getting paid £50 a gig, and that was it. That was our fees between 3 people and petrol. And we bought a toaster. We managed to find a toaster for £7 so we could get warm food, because we were eating baguettes and cheese all the time. And it was just a way that we could have something a bit warmer. But you can only do that for so long before everyone starts to decide they want to kill each other because of the misery. Sorry, but back to art.
No, I mean, it still relates. I'm thinking as well is that what you mentioned earlier about being about the melody, and then another band member being about the experimentation, makes me wonder, because you've used the experimentation in your artwork. You have this kind of this sense of keeping it unpredictable to a certain extent. And if I look back at the early stages of what you're making now in 2020, when you were making similar but much darker work, I would say you had lots of darker sections, and it seems to be given more and more space. Is this, do you think, do you ever look at the kind of line which you're taking, and is this something where you think you're working towards experimentation, or does that relate as well, where you're saying I still want to keep the melody and not too much experimentation in the artwork as well?
Yeah, I think it's a case of I want to keep pushing it. I don't want to push it, but for me, and a lot of artists don't care about this because they want to. I want to resonate with people still, and some artists aren't concerned with that. Some artists are about being abrasive, and that is their thing. They, like they want to make it hard for people to like their stuff. But with me, that I still want to cling on to something. I want people to resonate with my paintings. So it's a experimentation, and this is balance, I think.
Yeah.
I'd like to take people onto some sort of journey without feeling I'm alienating them in a way. I don't,
It does seem to relate to what you've mentioned as well with the music, is that you've got this sense of connection with the audience that you don't want to challenge too strongly, because it's already, abstract already has inherent challenges to it, but it does attract people because of how you've presented the work. It's got this lovely balance of colors and shapes on it. I was amazed to see, because I've never read I very rarely read the titles of artwork, because that can really change the way that you see them. And I was surprised because I was just looking through thinking, right, there's certain pieces of yours that I want to discuss. And I was surprised as soon as I started reading them, I thought, oh, there's figurative connections with your artwork, which I just assumed there wasn't. I always assumed there was no figurative part of it at all.
Yeah, I think that comes from wanting to paint, still enjoying a landscape in the abstract. And like I said before, I think for me it's dreamscapes. and I'm not a hippie type person, but I'm quite fascinated by dreams, and I want to create that sort of world you get in a dream where things don't quite make sense sometimes. You know, it's something that's familiar but twisted so it doesn't quite make sense. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like not to go into too. It's not science fiction, but I like to paint a landscape without humans in it, without almost a landscape that is our world but isn't quite.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. No, I can see that. That's I think again it appeals to me quite a bit because it's something which I look for in the landscape. I think we discussed this before we started recording, is that the ideal landscape is given quite a bit of space so that you can walk around without it being too crowded. And I look for that in landscapes as well. It always frustrates me when I see a beautiful landscape painting and they put one person in there. I just thought, oh no, if you removed that one person, I would have been so much more connected with this piece.
It's they've you don't own that painting anymore because there's someone in it that already owns that world. That world isn't yours.
Yeah, it's strange. I always describe it to a friend of mine. She's a wonderful landscape painter and she'll often pop one person in. I said to her, well, before you pop that person, because it was always last, she never worked the person in from the start. I said, before they were in there, I was looking at the painting as if I was looking at the landscape. As soon as you've popped a person in there, it's almost as if I have to identify as that person in the landscape, which I resent because I'd rather look from outside instead of look from inside and be trapped in the painting. It's a weird psychological mechanism, which I find very strange.
Yeah, it's probably part of it may be a reason. I lived in London for a while, and now I live in Pembrokeshire, which is rural, and there's not many people about. So that's probably part of it. My wanting to get away from people, perhaps.
Yeah.
Although it comes with its problems. I think life takes you on a journey, and you end up where you end up. But I think in an ideal world, London, New York, Los Angeles, maybe to a certain extent, would be better environments for someone trying to make a career in art. There's a lot more. There's other artists there for a start. Where I live, and I can't imagine there's many people making art, or there's so many galleries for showing. So I think London, New York are much better environments. But for me, I lived in London for a few years, and it just became too much. I think it's financially living in these places is difficult. Before that, I lived in Cardiff, and we were able to do part-time jobs and do scratty and scrat about, getting money here, there, enough to live and survive and make art, make the band. Whereas in London, I suddenly find that very difficult. It's like the perfect place for a young person to become an artist, but I don't understand how they do it, how they earn enough money without the job totally taking over from the art. It astounds me. But I went off on a tangent there. But I think I was maybe pointing out that it's beautiful here in rural Pembrokeshire. I love it, but it comes with its problems, that there's not galleries you can go and see so much, and there's not really an artistic gang to hang around with. Here you're very much out by yourself, and you have to make more effort in approaching these galleries.
It's hard to find community, I think, as an artist, as you said. It's a very solitary profession. How have you found the reception of your work when you've exhibited abroad? Because you mentioned earlier about an exhibition that you came back from. Where was it? It wasn't Portugal, was it? Where did you say it was?
Mallorca. It was in Palma in Mallorca, and that was that was probably the busiest show I'd done, and it took me back. I'm quite a shy person, and I wasn't quite ready for the amount of people that are going to be there, and the amount of questions I was getting asked about, why I paint and that sort of thing. But that was good. The reception there was great. it's good. There was a couple from Wales that from St David's, 20 minutes up the road, and they happened to walk past, and they'd seen, Adam Taylor from Pembrokeshire, and they were like, "Oh my God!" And they were like, mind was blown that someone from where they lived had a show out here. So I got chatting to them. They were really nice. But yeah, it's good. It was an amazing reception, and I enjoyed. I think I enjoyed after the event. I look back and I enjoyed it more than when I was physically there, because it was quite stressful.
There are certain questions that I always ask on the podcast. One of which is about the color palettes, which I think will be quite interesting with you, because it's a bit different to what normally artists have a very conventional approach to art making. So they'll have similar colors on their palette. And I'm wondering whether yours might be different. I mean, I even looked back and saw that you used to use enamel. Do you still use enamel, or you said it's just oil?
No, that was back when I was using the odds and ends of paints that happened to be in my house when I moved into it. So it started with enamels, and then I moved back onto oil paints, which I'd always used. I started on oil paints by accident and quite young. Lucky enough, my gran had she'd done a course back in the 1960s and bought all the gear, and then never worked out, and then she just kept her oil paints from the 1960s. And then in the mid-90s said, "Oh," I mentioned I was into painting, I said, "Oh, you can have these if you like." And I, and I was just started using her, and most of them still worked, even from the 1960s.
Wow.
They're beautiful things as well. Little old, I don't have any of them anymore, but she had brushes, she had palette knives, things that I used to just use white spirit to water them down. I didn't know about linseed oil, I didn't know about anything. So that would have been about when I was 16, something like that.
Yeah.
So I got into oil painting then, and never. Acrylic painting is something I'm quite envious of. I quite like the way that it seems less dangerous, all the chemicals in it, but I just, because I've been so long in oil painting, I can't get my head around the acrylic, even though it would be something I'd like to do.
I think it's acrylic I found more tricky than I think it's given credit for. I think people assume that it's a beginner paint, but I think it's the opposite. I think it's actually a very difficult medium to make successful.
That's exactly what I found.
Yeah.
I like the ability with oil that you can rub it away.
Yeah.
You can rub it all off, whereas it's difficult with acrylic because of the drying time, shorter drying time.
It's what my brother uses, so we discuss the difference quite often. But yeah, it's a fascinating distinction between the approaches for what works with acrylic and what works with oil. I started with acrylic, so that's all old acrylics that I've got behind me there.
I can see now, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I will pull those out, but I'm purely oil these days. But I for a long time would just use acrylic, just trying to make it work, and it's so tricky. So I was more often unsuccessful than not. So yeah, and it's still the same with oil, to be honest. I'm not exactly a masterful painter by any means, but anyway, yeah. So if I could, what colors, if you don't mind taking us through, what colors are on your palette?
It is Prussian blue. Prussian blue is a biggie. Tar, bitumen, bitumen brown, and the blue I use is again more. It's yellow ochre, Prussian blue, and white, so titanium white, to various degrees, and so yeah, they're pretty much the only colours I use. And then I use oil. So sorry, I use oil sticks. I think I don't know what colours they are. I have a pink one, I have an orange one, and a light blue one, and then just oil pastels then for the lines. I do have other oil paint colours, but I barely use them, hardly ever.
But the oil sticks, similar to pastels, will be used for marks on top. Is that right? For the
yeah. The oil sticks are very similar to the oil pastel, and I'll use them for the pink areas and rub them out, and I leave like a bit of a ghost of pink. And
well, if I could, then there are certain paintings of yours that I've seen, which again, beautiful tone that you have and color that you mixed, but it's a pink background. And I'm curious what colors you used for that, because there's one, let me bring it up. In fact, no, there's a series of 3 here. One, for example, called A Red Cross. Another one,
Yeah, I know.
Cold Water Summer, I think it's called. So yeah, so these is again, what color are you using to make that pink? Because it's just beautiful. It's very you. It's very
Yeah, I've forgotten about the pink. I've not used the pink in sort of 3 months or so now, so that's why I've forgotten. But yes, the pink is quite a flesh tone, isn't it? I liked to me, the blue felt like the earth. You know, it's the sea, it's the sky, it's what it looks like from space, I guess. And then I quite like the pink, felt like skin. It felt like, you know, my own skin sort of thing. And that's what I tried to capture. And precise colours I can't remember, but that was a very pale pink, let it dry, rub over the bitumen, and that suddenly tinted it in the same way it tints the green blue into a more turquoisey realm. It tinted that, it added a bit of brown, I don't know, that suddenly gave it a skin-like quality.
Yeah.
So that's the thought behind that.
That's brilliant. So it gives it like an inherent warmth to the whole body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so when I was quoting the colours I used, there are different colours for the pink ones, but yeah.
I'm terrible for being you know, a bit fussy with things like this, going, oh, just a moment. I absolutely I'm a bit too curious when it comes to the technicalities of how people do their paintings. And I think it's interesting for our listeners and viewers that just to think about this mysterious piece of work that they're confronted with in a gallery has an origin and a kind of, you know, way that it comes about, which I think a lot of people won't think of. But otherwise, what's your experience been with galleries? Is it always been good, or have you had some tricky moments with some galleries? How's it been?
Good, I think. I can't think of any bad ones. I had a similar question with the gallery I share with in Spain. They did an interview with me similar to this, and they asked me if you had any funny experiences in your studio. It just totally bamboozled me. I couldn't think of anything. It just seemed just a strange question. But back to no bad experience with galleries, I don't think. It's all been quite positive start as far as I can think of. Yeah, as soon as this call ends, I'll think of something. But they've all been lovely so far.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm not fishing for definitely negative stuff. It's sometimes when you ask artists, they have had issues, and I'd rather them be open, because there's a great benefit for just being honest about. Well, here's a question. Sorry, yeah, please.
I thought of the story now.
Yeah.
When I first, I was surprised I forgot this, because it's wound me up for a lot of years. I've not been able to let this one go. There was a gallery in Tenby. When I first moved to Tenby, I was very shy about showing my work, very nervous, and I pre-internet, you know, although the internet was there then, but I wasn't on the internet much, and I sort of walked in with one of my paintings that I did at university. It was a hanging fish, I think, on against a black background. I sort of nervously went up and I said, you know, would you be interested in showing this? And they said, oh, you know, we love it. Yep, we'll put it in. They put it in the window. It was a tiny nothing gallery. And it sold within a week. And it was probably the first paint I've ever sold. I just couldn't, I was so excited. I think it's £500 and I got 200, I got half 250. And to me, I was so broke at the time. That was like amazing money. That was just like mind blowing. So I sent them some more paintings via the internet, and they sent a single message back, and it said, I'm sorry, Adam, your paintings just don't do it for us. I thinking it was a mistake, because it really knocked me. They were a completely nothing gallery, but at the time when I was starting out, it really sort of, I got my partner was like, can you read this as well? I can't believe it wasn't like, you know, these paintings aren't perhaps what we're looking for, maybe send us some new ones, because the first one was sold and we're very keen. It was just, your paintings don't do it for us. Signed his name, so that was the only bad experience, but they're shut down since. I got them shut down, and I think they're retired, whatever. But that did wind me up. But other than that, good positive experiences.
Yeah. So after that, did that affect kind of did it give you any kind of hesitance with other galleries? Did it make you think?
Yeah, definitely. As silly as it sounds, because I was at a sort of low point in my life. The band had finished. I was just doing whatever terrible job I could get. I was working in kitchens, that sort of thing. And yeah, I just felt a bit low, and it was a bit of a knock to my confidence, really, because it was when I was first starting into paintings. I think what helped, the biggest thing for me that helped was lockdown. It was suddenly a time when, by that time, I was doing the foraging job, and we're all locked down, and I was getting a wage to be locked down, and I just started painting. And I was painting. It was the first time I'd painted, 9 to 5 every single day for months and months, and that for me was the biggest accelerator that's, I think, got me to where I am now. And without lockdown, I don't know, because before that I was getting an hour here, an hour there a week possibly to paint because of the work and life, whereas it suddenly I had all this time. I just piled it into that, and then I entered a few art competitions. You get these, enter this, enter various things, and that was how Ralph first found out about me, from Ffin Parc gallery in North Wales. I'd entered, I think it's some RCA exhibition, and he saw my painting, liked it, bought it, and then phoned me and said, once lockdown's over, do you fancy joining our gallery? So that was the kind of start of it all, really.
Wow.
So
that's a fantastic gallery to be in.
Yeah, not to praise COVID, because obviously a lot of people died, but I mean, it was a positive for me because I was given time that I never normally, working in kitchens or whatever jobs you were doing. It was just.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists have expressed how that was an unusually good time for art sales and artists to grow their profile. So yeah, that does seem to have been a bit of a phenomenon, and a great one to come out of something that is so bleak. But yeah, I think I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask how you became introduced to Ffin Parc. I think a lot of artists and people who watch the podcast and listen are curious about how to approach that gallery, because they are bombarded with applications from artists, and it's so difficult for him to fit artists in, and yet he's so passionate about art himself. So yeah, that's always been a bit of a mystery, I think, for people.
Pure luck for me that he happened. I think he was a judge at that competition. I'm not sure. Pure luck, and his email had gone to junk. It was only when I checked junk a few months later. But and after that, maybe it stems from that bad experience with the gallery in Tenby, that small gallery. I try not to ever approach a gallery. I put things on Instagram, do exhibitions, and then usually galleries get in touch with me, and it goes from there. I would not normally contact a gallery. I don't like the rejection, I guess.
Yeah. No, sorry, yeah.
I was going to say, along these lines, another thing that I have no explanation to, that makes no sense, that's been a huge help in my career, was, again, an email out of the blue from a London gallery saying that the artist Sean Scully, the abstract artist, is putting together a sort of mixed group show he was doing at this gallery, and has seen your work, likes it, and would you want to take part? And for me, I'd been a fan of Sean Scully for years, and that was sort of a mind-blowing experience. And doing that, I think, really helped, because it suddenly put me into a category where, it would take me a million years to be in this category. So it levitated me, and I think other galleries suddenly thought, oh, perhaps, this is someone to take more seriously than before. Again, I don't know how that happened. I don't know how he'd seen my work.
Yeah.
Instagram, I'm assuming. I don't know.
Would you recognize the gallerist that you exhibited with, the one who sent you that unusual email? Would you recognize him if he showed up at one of your exhibitions?
No, because he's since died.
Oh.
And his wife, they're elderly now. It's probably not nice to say this, is it? But one thing that did make me happy is through I don't even know how I found this out, but a gallery that I was showing in, a woman was buying a piece of my work, and she brought a friend along, which was his wife that ran the gallery. So that I got some sort of weird happiness from that. That haha, you know.
That's what I was hoping for, really, is that there'd be some way of saying, well, it may not be for you, but the rest of the world seems to be quite happy.
It was, I can't understand why they were so harsh, really. It was unusual. They were an elderly couple. It wasn't like they were, I don't know why they turned on me so much. But I don't have a very thick skin. I think being in the art world, you need a thick skin, and I certainly don't.
It's tricky. It just doesn't make sense that the first piece you give them sells straight away, and then they send that email.
Send us more paintings. It just doesn't.
Very strange. But there we are. No, I'm glad that you remembered that, because that's good for people to hear, because I think we all need to be mentally and emotionally prepared for how unexpected some of these interactions can be, because you just don't see it coming. I've had unusual interactions with people, and when it's to my face, I just laugh, because I kind of say, oh, I'm glad you've told me, but it's, people say, well, I won't say what people say, but people have said some quite rude things to me, and it's just made me laugh, and I've just, thanked them for their blunt honesty, because it's so unusual to have it face to face, whereas, via email or text is different. But for someone to say to your face something negative and something quite unpleasant is, I don't know, something inherently funny about that to me. So
I thought I can't laugh. I hold a grudge. It's terrible. We got in the Cardiff days. It was in a Cardiff magazine. I'm shocked they did this. It was Buzz magazine in Cardiff. The magazine's irrelevant, but it was a magazine that a lot of people saw, and an early single review. The reviewer had put, "This music is effing S," about my band, and I cut it out and I took it around with my wallet. It was the reviewer said, like, I'm making it up now, I can't remember, it was like an RS or something, and I was trying to think, who could that be? Richard Stevens. It was bugging me to, who was this RS? But I kept that in my wallet for years, and it was years later, a friend of mine was like, "What you got that for?" And he took it out of my wallet, he ripped it up. He said, "Why are you taking this around with you? This is madness." So, but yeah, sorry, I've waffled.
No,
irrelevant things
that I can completely relate to. It's like I said, it's different when they don't say it to your face. When they say it to your face, I almost respect it and quite appreciate and enjoy it. Whereas when they say it with a distance, it's hard to let go of, because you just think, what's the problem? What's made
I took that around me a long time. I'm not a fan of it to my face or anything. I'm not very thick-skinned. Useless.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm very fortunate to not mind it to my face, because I think it's not nice anyway, but I think the couple of times that I have had unpleasant interactions to my face, it may have just been the shock of it. I think if I was expecting it, it'd be different, whereas I think it was just feeling quite proud of myself with what I'd done and thinking, this is, I actually like this, which is rare to like your own work sometimes, and showing it to someone and just have them say no, but in a very, in different words. But yeah, so for the viewers and listeners, where would you like them to go to support you, to see your work, to purchase your work? Where would you send them?
At the moment, I have work in Ffin Parc Gallery in North Wales. I also have a few pieces in the And Gallery in Edinburgh, in Scotland. And then, if you happen to be in Spain, I've got some work in a gallery called Gallery Red in Mallorca. I think that's all of them.
Fantastic. And for anyone who can't make it in person, are there online places that you think would be good for them to go and see and purchase your work?
It just the websites of all them. I only sell through those galleries at the moment, so just the websites of those galleries. Ffin Parc, Gallery Red, and the And Gallery. I hope I'm not missing anyone. But yeah.
If you are, I will go searching and make sure that it's put on the screen. But also, I will direct people to your website and to your Instagram as well, because you've got that on your Instagram as a link to your website, and I think it's absolutely beautiful work. It's really does connect with people, and I just want to congratulate you on having such an interesting and beautiful body of work. It's been lovely talking to you. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you for being a guest on the program.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.